The dust swirled in golden eddies across the barren plains, as Faith Anderson spotted the lone figure kneeling in the dirt outside, what remained of a once prosperous homestead. April 1876 had brought nothing but misfortune to Rattlesnake Gulch, a remote settlement in the Arizona Territory where drought had strangled the land for months. Faith pulled her horse to a stop, the animal's labored breathing matching her own trepidation as she approached the man whose shoulders heaved with silent sobs. "Mister?" she called, her voice carrying on the hot wind. "Are you hurt?" The man didn't turn immediately. His broad shoulders were slumped beneath a worn leather vest, his once white shirt now stained the same rusty color as the earth beneath him. When he finally looked up, Faith's breath caught in her throat. Despite the grime and despair etched into his face, his eyes were a startling blue like water in a desert. "God took everything," he said, his voice cracking like the parched earth. His hand swept toward the charred timbers of what had once been a home. Faith dismounted slowly, her boots landing softly in the dust. She stood tall despite her weariness from days of travel. 23 years of hard living had taught her to face adversity head-on, and something about this broken man pulled at her. "Not me," she replied simply, extending her hand. "I'm still here." Wade Quincy stared at the woman's outstretched hand as if it were a mirage. Her auburn hair escaped a practical braid, framing a face too determined to be conventionally pretty, but striking nonetheless. Dirt smudged her cheek, and her plain cotton dress had seen better days, but she stood before him like an answer to prayers he'd stopped saying. "Wade Quincy," he managed, taking her hand briefly before letting go and rising to his feet. At 30, he'd already lived several lifetimes' worth of struggle. "Though there's not much left of what was mine." Faith glanced around at the devastation. "What happened here, fire, started in the night, took my cattle, my house." His voice faltered. "My wife and boy were already gone." "Fever last winter." Faith didn't offer empty sympathies. Instead, she reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. "Drink, then we'll figure out what comes next." Wade eyed her warily. I need somewhere to stay while I look for my brother. You need help rebuilding." Faith's directness came from necessity. Orphaned at 16, she'd learned that survival in the West required boldness. "I can cook, sew, and shoot straighter than most men." Wade almost smiled. "That's quite a list of qualifications, Miss Anderson, Faith Anderson." "Faith," he repeated as if testing the word. "Seems I lost mine a while back." "Then it's a good thing I brought enough for both of us," she replied, her green eyes meeting his without flinching. That night they camped among the ruins. Faith cooked a meager but satisfying meal from her supplies while Wade gathered what could be salvaged from the ashes. They spoke little, both aware of the impropriety of their situation, yet bound by the practical necessities of survival. As the stars emerged in the vast western sky, Faith spread her bedroll on one side of the fire, while Wade took the other. The night sounds of coyotes and distant thunder were their only companions. "Why are you looking for your brother?" Wade finally asked, breaking the silence. Faith stared into the flames. "Flynn is the only family I have left. Got a letter saying he struck it rich in the silver mines near here. I need to make sure he's not dead in a ditch somewhere." Wade nodded. Flynn Anderson's name had crossed his path before. "There's a man by that name who comes through. Gambler, spends more time at the tables than the mines." Faith sighed. "That sounds like Flynn, always chasing the easy fortune." "Town's a day's ride from here. I'll take you tomorrow," Wade offered. "And then what?" Faith asked. "You'll just come back here and continue kneeling in the dust." Wade's jaw tightened. "I've got nothing left to build with. No seed, no cattle, no money." "You've got hands," Faith countered. "And so do I. I've helped raise barns before. We start with shelter, then worry about the rest." Wade stared at her across the fire, this woman who had appeared from nowhere offering help he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "Why would you do that?" he asked, genuine puzzlement in his voice. Faith was quiet for a long moment. "Because 7 years ago, nobody helped when I needed it." and I swore I'd never walk past someone who was suffering. She laid down and turned away from him. Good night, Mr. Quincy. Wade stared at her back long after her breathing had evened into sleep. Morning broke with clear skies and renewed purpose. Wade had spent the night thinking about Faith's words, and when she awoke, he was already clearing debris from what remained of his home's foundation. I figure we'll need lumber from town, he said without preamble. And I know a few men who might help in exchange for future favors. Faith smiled, tying back her hair with practiced movements. That's more like it. They rode to town together, Faith's mare and Wade's remaining stallion kicking up dust along the trail. Rattlesnake Gulch was little more than a collection of wooden buildings strung along a rutted main street, but to Faith, it represented hope of finding Flynn. The Silver Dollar Saloon dominated the town center, its painted facade a stark contrast to the drab buildings surrounding it. Wade tied their horses outside. Your brother will likely be in here if he's in town, he said. But you shouldn't. Faith was already striding through the batwing doors. Wade hurried after her, acutely aware of the heads turning as she entered. Women, especially unaccompanied women, were rare in the saloon. The piano player faltered mid-song, and conversation dimmed. Faith scanned the room, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. In the corner, a card game continued uninterrupted, and there, holding his cards with the same cocky confidence he'd had since childhood, sat Flynn Anderson. Flynn, Faith called out, moving toward him. Her brother looked up, surprise washing over his handsome face. Faith. What in tarnation are you doing here? Before she could answer, Wade stepped up beside her, his presence a silent barrier between Faith and the curious onlookers. Flynn eyed Wade suspiciously. Who's this? Wade Quincy, Wade answered before Faith could. Your sister came looking for you. Flynn's gaze darted between them, a calculating gleam in his eyes. Well, sister dear, you found me, though I must say your timing is unfortunate. I'm in the middle of winning back what I lost yesterday. Faith's jaw tightened. We need to talk privately. Flynn sighed dramatically but folded his cards. Gentlemen, family matters call. I'll return to relieve you of your money shortly. Outside in the harsh sunlight, Flynn's appearance was less impressive. His fine clothes couldn't hide the hollowness in his cheeks or the tremor in his hands. You're in trouble, Faith said. It wasn't a question. Flynn laughed without humor. When am I not? But this time I've nearly got it figured out, just need a bit more capital. Wade stood silently, watching the siblings with a guarded expression. I didn't come to bail you out, Faith said firmly. I came to bring you home. Our farm is gone, Flynn interrupted. Taken by the bank, remember, there is no home. Faith faltered for the first time since Wade had met her. I was hoping. Flynn's expression softened. Faith, you've always been the one with hope, but the reality is I'm better off here. There's opportunity. There's debt and danger, Faith countered. I've been asking around since I hit town yesterday. You owe money to dangerous people. Flynn glanced nervously down the street. Which is why I need to get back to that game. Wade finally spoke. I need lumber and supplies. Could use an extra hand rebuilding my place too. Flynn looked at him as if he'd suggested they fly to the moon. Do I look like a carpenter? You look like a man who needs to disappear for a while, Wade replied evenly. My place is a day's ride out. Might be a good place to let things cool down. Faith's surprised gaze met Wade's. He hadn't mentioned offering Flynn refuge. Flynn seemed about to refuse when a large man emerged from the saloon, his face dark with anger. Anderson, you trying to skip town before settling your debt? Faith watched her brother pale. Marvin, I was just about to come back in with empty pockets and more promises. The man advanced, and Wade subtly shifted his stance, ready for trouble. How much does he owe? Faith asked directly. Marvin sized her up. $50. Faith didn't blink. We don't have it now, but we will. My brother is going to help Mr. Quincy rebuild his ranch. Once it's operational, you'll get your money. And why would I agree to that? Marvin asked, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Wade stepped forward. Because I'm vouching for his debt. and because Sheriff Mills might be interested in how you're charging interest on those loans of yours." Tension crackled between the men until Marvin spat in the dirt. 2 months. Then I collect with interest. As he stormed off, Flynn released a shaky breath. "Seems I'm joining your rebuilding crew after all." They spent the rest of the day gathering supplies on credit against Wade's good name. Despite his troubles, he was respected in the community, and several merchants extended him materials with promises of payment after the next cattle sale. By late afternoon, they had secured enough lumber, tools, and basic provisions to begin rebuilding. Faith also purchased fabric and household necessities, investing her meager savings in their shared future without a second thought. As they prepared to leave town, Flynn disappeared briefly, returning with a small pouch. "Seeds," he explained when Faith raised a questioning eyebrow. "If we're rebuilding, we might as well plant a garden." It was the first sign that Flynn might actually commit to helping, and Faith felt a flicker of the bond they had shared as children. The journey back to Wade's land was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the undertaking ahead. Faith watched Wade straight back as he rode ahead, wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. She had come to find her brother, not to rebuild a stranger's life and perhaps her own in the process. They arrived as the sun was setting, the ruins of Wade's homestead silhouetted against the crimson sky. In the twilight, Faith imagined she could see the ghost of what had been and the shadow of what might be. That night, as they again camped under the stars, Wade unfolded a weathered piece of paper. By firelight, he showed them the plans for his home, sketched years ago when hope had flowed as freely as the nearby creek now ran dry. "It's beautiful," Faith said, tracing the lines of the simple but solid design. "2 bedrooms," Wade nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "For the family I thought I'd have." Flynn, surprisingly serious, studied the plans. "We'll need to start with the foundation and frame. If we work hard, we could have the shell up in a week." Wade looked at him with new respect. "You know construction," Flynn shrugged. "I've picked up a few things here and there. Being a jack of all trades comes in handy when you're running from your mistakes." Faith touched her brother's arm, a silent acknowledgement of his rare honesty. As the fire died down, Wade remained awake long after the others had fallen asleep. He watched Faith's peaceful face in the dying firelight and felt something stir within him that he had thought forever buried possibility. The next morning marked the beginning of their shared labor. Wade and Flynn cleared the remaining debris while Faith prepared a work site, organizing tools and materials. By midday, they were laying out the new foundation, measuring carefully against Wade's plans. "It'll be bigger than before," Wade explained as he drove a stake into the ground. The old place was built in haste, just trying to meet the homestead requirements. Faith wiped sweat from her brow. "And this one? This one is built to last," he replied, their eyes meeting briefly before both looked away. Days blended into one another as they fell into a rhythm of work. Wade's knowledge of building combined with Flynn's surprising ingenuity made steady progress possible. Faith kept them fed, organized, and occasionally settled disputes between the two strong-willed men. A week into their labor, the basic frame stood like a skeleton against the wide sky. Faith felt a surge of pride as she helped hoist the final beam of the day into place. Wade secured it with powerful strikes of his hammer, each blow punctuating their achievement. That evening, bone-weary but satisfied, they sat beneath the partial shelter of what would become the front porch. "Never thought I'd see progress this fast," Wade admitted, passing a canteen to Faith. Their fingers brushed and neither pulled away immediately. Flynn, more observant than his sister gave him credit for, noted the exchange with interest. "You two make a good team," Faith flushed. "We all do." Wade looked at her longer than necessary before addressing Flynn. "Your sister is remarkable. You're lucky to have her." "Always has been," Flynn agreed, uncharacteristically earnest. "Too good for her own good, this one, always picking up strays and lost causes." He gave Wade a pointed look. Wade accepted the assessment with a nod. I won't argue with that. As the weeks passed, the house took shape, board by board, nail by nail. Faith planted a small garden using Flynn's seeds, tending it diligently despite the unforgiving soil. Wade repaired the well and irrigation ditches, coaxing water back to the parched earth. Flynn proved surprisingly reliable, though Faith caught him glancing toward town with longing when he thought no one was looking. She worried about the debt hanging over them but kept her concerns to herself. One evening, as Faith hung wet laundry on a makeshift line, Wade approached with an awkward formality that made her smile. "I've been thinking," he began, his hat in his hands, "about the sleeping arrangements once the house is finished." Faith continued pinning a shirt to the line. "I assumed Flynn and I would find our own place eventually." Wade shook his head. "That's not I mean," he took a breath. "Faith, I don't want you to go." She stilled, the damp fabric forgotten in her hands. "I've been alone since I lost my family," Wade continued, "and I thought that was my fate. But then you arrived, saying not me when I thought everything was gone, and you were right." Faith turned to face him fully, her heart beating faster. "I'm not proposing yet," Wade clarified. "That would be too fast, even for out here, but I'm asking if you might consider staying as a partner in this place, and perhaps in time." "Yes," Faith said simply, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. "I'll stay." Wade's smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of grief that had been etched there when she first found him. Hesitantly, he reached for her hand and she allowed him to take it, feeling the calluses that matched her own. "I should tell Flynn," she said, though she made no move to leave. "He already knows," Wade replied. "Asked me my intentions yesterday, threatened to shoot me if I hurt you." Faith laughed. "That sounds like Flynn." Wade's expression grew serious. "Faith, you should know I may never be whole again after what I lost, but I want to try. With you." In answer, she stepped closer and with a boldness that surprised them both, placed her hand against his cheek. "We're all broken somehow, Wade. We just find the pieces that fit together." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Faith rose to meet him. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the promise of something deeper to come. From the nearly completed house, Flynn watched the exchange with mixed emotions. His sister deserved happiness, but her choice complicated his own plans. Marvin's deadline loomed, and the money he had secretly been gathering wasn't enough yet. He would need to make a decision: soon stay and commit to this new life, or run as he always had. As summer progressed, the house neared completion. They celebrated by inviting neighbors from miles around to a modest gathering. Wade had managed to purchase a few head of cattle, the start of rebuilding his herd. Faith's garden yielded its first vegetables, small but triumphant against the harsh conditions. During the gathering, several of Wade's friends pulled him aside with warnings about suspicious strangers asking about Flynn in town. Wade thanked them for the information but kept it to himself, not wanting to spoil the day. That night, after the guests had departed, Wade found Flynn packing his few belongings. "Going somewhere?" Wade asked, leaning against the doorframe of the small room that had become Flynn's. Flynn didn't look up. "You know I can't stay. Marvin's deadline is in 3 days." "We'll face him together," Wade said. "Faith believes in you, so do I," Flynn laughed bitterly. "Then you're both fools. I've never stayed anywhere long enough to see the consequences of my actions. Why start now? Because this time you have something worth staying for." Wade stepped into the room. "Your sister loves you, and she's finally found some happiness. If you run, it'll break her heart." Flynn finally met his gaze. "And if I stay, men like Marvin will come here looking for me. They'll destroy everything you've built, again." Wade considered this. "Then we'll deal with Marvin. Legitimately, I've been setting aside money from cattle sales. It's not $50 yet, but it's close." Flynn's surprise was evident. "You'd pay my debt, for Faith," Wade clarified, "and because I think you're worth saving too." Flynn stared at him for a long moment before slowly unpacking his bag. The next morning, Faith noticed a change between the men but couldn't identify its cause. They worked together more seamlessly than before, finishing the last details of the house with newfound cooperation. That evening, Wade surprised Faith by asking her to accompany him to a special spot on his property. He led her to a small hill overlooking the homestead where he had spread a blanket. "I wanted you to see what you've helped create," he said, gesturing to the view below. From this vantage point, their achievement was stunning. The house stood proudly, smoke curling from the chimney where Flynn was preparing dinner. The small garden was a patch of green against the browns and reds of the landscape. In the distance, cattle grazed in the fading light. "It's beautiful," Faith said, emotion catching in her throat. Wade took her hand. "I never thought I'd have this again, a home, purpose." He paused. "Love," Faith squeezed his hand, words unnecessary between them. "I want to court you properly, Faith Anderson," Wade said. "And someday, if you'll have me, I want to make you my wife." Faith's smile rivaled the setting sun. "I think I'd like that very much, Wade Quincy." Their future seemed laid out before them like the vista they surveyed, full of promise despite the hardships they had endured. But as they made their way back to the house, the sound of approaching horses shattered their moment of peace. 3 riders appeared, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Faith recognized Marvin's bulky form leading the group. "Stay behind me," Wade instructed, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. They reached the house just as the riders pulled up. Flynn emerged, his own hand hovering near his weapon. "Evening, Anderson," Marvin called out. "Time to settle up." Flynn stepped forward. "The deadline's not until tomorrow," Marvin spat. "Decided to collect early. Heard rumors you might be skipping town." Wade moved slightly in front of Flynn. "We have most of the money, we need more time for the rest." Marvin's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't the deal." "It's all we can offer right now," Faith said, stepping up beside Wade despite his attempt to keep her back. One of Marvin's companions laughed. Maybe there's other ways she could help settle the debt. Wade's gun was in his hand before the man could finish his sentence. "You'll apologize to the lady." Tension crackled in the air as hands hovered over weapons. Faith's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "There's no need for violence. We can work this out." Flynn suddenly stepped forward, hands raised in surrender. "I have the money." Everyone turned to him in surprise. "Been saving from odd jobs in town," Flynn explained, reaching slowly into his pocket to produce a pouch. He tossed it to Marvin. $50. Count it if you like." Marvin weighed the pouch suspiciously before opening it. After counting, he nodded grudgingly. "Seems you're a man of your word after all, Anderson. Didn't expect that." "Neither did I," Flynn replied quietly, glancing at Faith. As Marvin and his men rode away, Faith turned to her brother. "You had the money all along. Why didn't you say anything?" Flynn looked embarrassed. "I was going to use it to leave, start fresh somewhere else, but then—" He glanced at the house they'd built together. This started feeling like home. Wade clapped Flynn on the shoulder. "Proud of you." Flynn shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Don't get used to it. I'm still thinking about trying my luck in California." Faith's face fell, but Flynn quickly added, "Not right away, though. Figure I should stick around long enough to see my sister properly courted." He gave Wade a meaningful look. "And maybe help expand that herd of yours. Could be profitable with the right partners." 3 months later, as autumn painted the landscape in golden hues, Faith stood in the doorway of the home they had built together. Inside, Flynn and Wade were arguing good-naturedly over the design of a new barn, their voices filling the house with the comfortable sounds of family. Faith thought back to that first day when she had found Wade kneeling in the dust, broken by loss. She remembered his words, "God took everything," and her response that had changed both their lives. Wade appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts." Faith leaned into him, savoring the strength and warmth of his presence. "I was just thinking about beginnings. And how sometimes they look like endings." Wade nodded, understanding without further explanation. "I thank God every day that you found me in that dust. And I thank God that you were there to be found," Faith replied, turning in his arms to face him. As Wade lowered his head to kiss her, Faith knew that their story was just beginning. There would be hardships ahead, drought, harsh winters, the unpredictable fortunes of ranch life, but they would face them together, building a legacy from the ashes of what had been lost. For in the vastness of the Western Territory, they had found not just shelter and sustenance, but the rarest treasure of all, a love born of resilience, forged in shared labor, and destined to endure long after the dust had settled.